Hello, everyone, and welcome to TC Band Presents Leadership and Authenticity, a conversation with Donzel Leggett. My name is Eric Alexander. I'm the founder and board chair of TC Band. I founded TC Band in 2013 while working for General Mills as the president of their Black Affinity Network. And I'm excited to have Donzel here today from General Mills to continue that legacy of leadership from the General Mills perspective. Today, we will review TC Band for those who aren't familiar with the work that we do and why we exist. I'll introduce Donzel, who will talk about ARC, the drivers for that organization and the objectives that he's delivering. Then he and I will have a conversation leveraging questions that were provided during the registration. And then we'll create an opportunity for attendees to do live Q&A. And then we'll wrap up for an on-time end at 1 p.m. I want to let everybody know that this session is being recorded. The benefit of that is that it allows us to share the content with attendees who aren't able to make the session. But I will be mindful of the topics that we're discussing. And so if there are Q&A topics that might be sensitive, I'll edit those out before I publish the session. So I want to create an opportunity for people to have honest, candid dialogue and ask the questions that you really want to know. And so this is a safe space to do that. So I want to make sure everyone feels comfortable being honest, candid, and transparent. So who are we? TC Band is an organization created, as I mentioned, in 2013 on the premise of that we can work better collaboratively than we can apart. We're stronger as we collaborate. And so the goal is to leverage the scale, scope, skill embodied within our Twin Cities Black Affinity Networks and broader community to deliver against 4 key outcomes. The first and primary for us is delivering quality professional development. The second is strengthening affinity networks and the organizations so as attendees learn and grow and develop. They grow themselves as well as driving impact to their organizations. Creating cross-organizational relationships, so networking and creating access to partners around the Twin Cities. And the last pillar is one we've focused on a lot lately is building community connections, which means engaging the community, creating a safe space for our community to have conversations that they might not be able to have in other places, and to create a forum to highlight the challenges and the opportunities that we face within our community. Again, the 2 pillars that we'll be delivering us today are professional development and building community connections. None of this work would be able to be achieved without the strong, talented professionals who serve on our board. They give tirelessly of their time, talents, and expertise to plan, execute, and source talent for our sessions. I want to highlight specifically Eric Black, Janelle Foster, and the Ken Charles for being founding members of the board. They've been on the journey with me since 2013, and I really appreciate your support and contributions to the work that we do every day. So thank you. I would also like to highlight the sponsoring organizations, Best Buy, Cargill, General Mills, Target, Wells Fargo, US Bank, and Johnson & Johnson. They provide funds, resources, and they allow their employees to volunteer their time to support the work that we do to positively impact the community. So what's our scope? And so one of the great things about the work that we do is that we impact a broad portion of our community, from fresh college graduates, professionals who are looking for new opportunities, to executives across Fortune 50 organizations. The benefit of having sponsors is that we allow attendees to access our content with no charge. And so our goal is that we don't want finances or expense to be a barrier to our professionals having access to the skills and experiences and talent and resources they need to achieve their professional goals and to be successful. So what are our results? So we've had over 2,900 hours of planning, which is our board identifying, planning, and executing events. We've had 85 development of sessions, this is the example today. We've had over 3,000 attendees, which yields almost 10,000 hours of development that positively impacts our community and allows our professionals to achieve their goals and objectives. And as a result, we've developed a more inspired, equipped, and engaged TC Band community. So what have we done in 2021? Thus far, we've held 2 sessions. The first one was Building Black Wealth. The second was Leadership, Race, and Authenticity, a candid conversation with St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter. Both these sessions are available for those who weren't able to attend by replay on YouTube. So feel free to go out and join us on YouTube, like the post, and feel free to follow us there as well. So what do we have coming up? We have the session today, of course, and then we have a seminar on June 19th, Developing Leadership from Within, and we'll see a slide on that later. Building Wealth Through Real Estate, which is a follow-up to our Building Wealth session. And then we have a seminar in October, November timeframe that focuses on building your future. So if you have your smartphones and you haven't registered for this session, this is my shameless plug and marketing ploy to generate additional traffic to the event. And so you can click the QR code right there and register for an event while we walk through the slides. This will be a great conversation. We have, as you can see, we have a great slate of panelists and professionals and experts across multiple genres of industry. And the focuses will be moving from mid-level levels to executive levels, dealing with imposter syndrome, 3 pillars of leadership, and building community. So if you're out there, you have some time on your hands on a Saturday, you want to learn and grow and develop, and then you want to build some broader professional networks, this will be a great opportunity for you. So I'm sure Donzel, I think we generated registrations by another 40 or so during this session. So thanks everybody who joined in and registered for us for this event today. So how do you find out what we have going on? So we have lots of ways to do that. We have Instagram, LinkedIn. Feel free to join our LinkedIn group, email distribution, follow us on YouTube to review our videos, and you can join our, access our website here, and that has links to our videos and to registration for our events. So now, Donzel Leggett. So as you can see on the screen, Donzel is a very talented and accomplished professional. I've known Donzel for many years from my time working at General Mills. And what you see on the side here is an extremely abridged version of his bio. There's not enough pages or slides in this deck to capture all of the work that he's done, the work that he continues to do, and the impact that he's having on the community. So I'll leave this here. I won't read that, but I will share my perspectives having known Donzel and having worked with him. 3 things that I've learned from my experience with Donzel, and 1 thing that I just learned when I received the bio. The first one is he is passionate, and that'll be crystal clear when he starts speaking. He has whatever he says, it comes from deep within and his gut and his heart, and so you'll feel that as he shares his perspective. He talks about the work that he's doing with ARC, and he talks about the work he's doing as a leader. The other thing I would say, he pushes himself and others to do more and to be better. And when I was doing the debrief and prepping for this session, he challenged me, this part of that debrief. I thought I was doing some good stuff. And he's like, yeah, that's okay, but it's not fixed. So you have more work to do. I have more work to do. We all have work to do. And so this conversation might be a little bit uncomfortable for people because he's going to be candid and transparent. And this topic is important, but I'm confident you will be pushed to do more. And I think we all should do more because the issue isn't resolved, and until it's resolved, there's always work for all of us to do. And then I would say he's all in. He created ARC. He's on boards. He's doing all kinds of things that are above and beyond what you would expect. And it was interesting. I had a conversation with Donzel when we were prepping, and I was like, "You're doing this and this," and then I'm on LinkedIn. It's like midnight, and then I see an email post come through. If you're traveling, feel free to book your travel with us. I'm like, Donzel, you're doing a travel agency too? And so I was like, save something for the rest of it. So again, if you think you're doing a lot, you probably are, but Donzel's doing more. And one of the questions I'll talk to him about is, what drives him, what pushes him to do more, and what drives his ambition and pursuit of continuing to achieve higher levels of success. And then the last piece, which was new for me that I learned at Donzel when you sent over the bio and this glamour shot here, is that Donzel is clearly also a GQ model. So I thought I'd maybe highlight that because this was new for me. So I'll let him share that new information as he shares his update. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Donzel Leggett as he talks about ARC, and then we'll move over to our fireside chat. So Donzel, thanks for joining us.
Eric, you're making me laugh, man. You should be a comedian. You give Chris Rock a run for his money. You're making it's all too good to be true, man. It's all too good to be true. But man, I really appreciate you having me here and being able to speak to this group. Some have been looking forward to a great deal, and I'm going to try to be fairly short in talking about the Anti-Racism Commitment Coalition, so that we can get into some Q&A with a fireside chat. But this is something that I'm very passionate about. I have a lot of passions, but certainly this is one that I'm putting a lot of my time and energy in. And so our vision at ARC, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you kind of an overview of ARC. I'm going to talk about the vision, talk about the mission. Then I'll take you on a journey of kind of why I started it, what we're all about, what we're doing now, what we've accomplished, and what we need from you. So our vision is to build a racism-free world. It's highly aspirational, as you can tell, but we believe that if you want to do something great, you have to set great stretch goals. And as Eric said, our view is that as long as racism still exists, you haven't done enough. All of us are doing something, but I have to push myself every day to say I'm not doing enough as long as racism exists anywhere in the world. And certainly we know we have more than enough work to do just here in the United States. But this is our vision, and we are aggressively pursuing it. If you go to the next slide, Eric, our mission on how we're going to do that is to inspire, to educate, and to support you to transform yourself and your network to take action, to be anti-racist, and to spread anti-racism. Now we'll talk more as I get into why I started the organization, what we're doing differently. But I'd say that this is a very targeted mission, and it's really all about getting people to transform themselves and to transform the people around them. And so, Eric, if you go to the next slide, I want to start now by just taking you back to 1 year and 1 day ago, because that really was the trigger that forced me to do something with ARC. Prior to George Floyd's murder, I had been engaged. I had been doing things. I ran for office because I felt like somebody needed to do something. I was involved in the community. I was speaking out. But when George Floyd was murdered, I remember my son sent me a text. I think he was in California at the time, saying, "Hey, you hear about, what the police did to the man in downtown Minneapolis?" And these days, you're never surprised that somebody has been brutalized or killed by the police, someone of color. It wasn't until the next day when I saw that video, and the subsequent days after that I really began to be angered. I'll put it that way. Then my anger grew because I started getting texts and emails, mainly from white people, mostly white colleagues, basically saying stuff like, "I'm very sorry this happened, Donzel," to someone they didn't say it, but to a Black person. "My heart goes out to you. My heart is broken." And the more I got these texts and these emails, the angrier I got, because not one of them said anything about whether they were upset or whether they were angry. Not one of them seemed to be outraged that this happened to a human being. And none of them said that they were going to do anything different. And I remember this very distinctly because one of my neighbors, he's like the board association director, sent me a note about my lawn being 1 inch over the line of the sidewalk or something like that. And I remember texting him back and saying, "Why don't you give me a call?" Because what I don't understand is why you would send me an email about grass being 1 inch over the line on the sidewalk when a human being was just freaking killed 30 minutes from our house and people are protesting and you're worrying about grass. So it was those things that really started boiling over and making me realize that I didn't like how this was going. Even on some of our Zoom calls, of course we were in the pandemic, people, again, it's very sad what happened to George Floyd, but then they were talking about, going to their cabin and stuff like that. And the more I heard these things, the angrier I got. So I made a video, and I targeted the video very specifically to people in the suburbs, mainly white people, who I felt were not in the game and who I felt needed to get in the game if this was going to change. And I wanted them to feel accountable, and I wanted them to feel shook. So I sent this video. If you haven't seen it, it's still out there. I put it out on social media. I knew that it would get people upset because I called out people in places like Edina, people who live on Lake Minnetonka, people who are going to their cabins. and not speaking out, standing up, taking action to stop racism. And I mean, there were some other things I said. You check it out, but I knew that it would create some uncomfortable feelings in boardrooms, and here, certainly in Minneapolis and other places. Subsequent to, after I sent that video out, certainly there was some blowback in some places, but the majority of the feedback I got from people, not just in the US, but all over the world was, man, we hear you. I'm pissed off too. I'm angry too. It's no more time for heartbreak. We have to do something. But Donzel, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. I'm only one person. How can I make a difference? And so as I got these responses, I started trying to assess, well, what could be next? As I looked at some of the organizations that were trying to fight racism, I felt like there weren't any that were targeted toward holding people accountable to change themselves, to transform themselves, and to transform the people around them. And I felt like if I could create an organization like that, then every single person has a role. There's no way you can say, I can't do anything. If you don't want to go march, to the Capitol in St. Paul, fine. If you don't want to go stand on the street and get rubber bullets shot at you, fine. If you don't want to put a video out to everyone in the world declaring what you're about, fine. But what you can do is you can target the people in your immediate network, the people who you're closest to, and I guarantee you there's people in that group that are not anti-racist, and I'll guarantee you there's some in there that are racist. And you can hold them accountable to transform, or you can walk away from it. I mean, I broke it down that simply. Everybody can do that because racism only survives because we allow it to. We tolerate it. We have beer with a guy that might be a racist. We say that, well, this person's a Christian. Yeah, they don't really line up on the right side of things, but they're a good guy. I like golfing with this guy. Yeah, he says some things off color. I'll tolerate it. My Uncle Joe, I just got to deal with him a couple times a year. I'll my grandfather, my kids, they hear him say these bad things. As long as we tolerate racism will never go away. So our view was, let's create an organization that forces people, that trains them and transforms them to then equip them to transform the people in their network. And that's really what differentiates us. We said that, hey, we're going to be open to everybody. Doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter, what race you are, if you want to call it that, ethnicity, color, I don't care what it is, you're welcome to join ARC. I don't care what language you speak, you're welcome to join ARC. Doesn't matter what country you're from, you're welcome to join. I don't care if you're LGBTQ, IA, Two-Spirit, we want you to join ARC. If you're a Republican or a conservative, we want you to join ARC. If you're a Christian, we want you to join ARC. A Muslim, we want you to join ARC. A Hindu, we want you to join ARC. However, you have to put anti-racism above those views. If you can't do that, then you're probably not going to be part of the organization. You're not going to be part of the movement. Now, what we want is for someone who's close to you to be part of the organization. We'll help them build the capability to work on you. But our view is, if we're going to eliminate racism, then the treatment of humanity and the understanding that anti-racism, meaning recognizing that structural and systemic racism exist, recognizing that they emanate from white supremacy, and recognizing that to eliminate it, we have to stand up against it and destroy the systems and the structures that allow it to exist. And that means the least you can do is hold the people in your network accountable to convert to anti-racism. Everyone can do that. So what have we accomplished so far? So we started with a group of about 6 volunteers. And this was back October 1st. So we officially became an organization. We launched on October 1st. So what are we, about 7-8 months later, we're over 50 volunteers. We have a board of directors, about 13 folks. We have 7 departments of dedicated volunteers, whether it's in marketing. We have an organization that kind of makes sure we're complying with all the regulations that are out there for 501c3s. We have an IT department that works on our website. We have a events group and resources group that ensures that we've got the right resources when people visit our site, plans events. Our next event is planned for June, I think it's June 12th, which will be youth that will be speaking about their perspective on anti-racism. Just so you get a good perspective, we have a diversity built into our organization. So we wanted to make sure that our board was going to be majority people of color, which it is, majority female, which it is, because women tend to make things happen, and it's just the truth. I mean, if you look at who's driving the anti-racist movement, a lot of times, it's Black women. And so what I'm trying to do is say, let's celebrate that, but hey, we need white women to do something too. You can't sit on the sideline. So we got them involved. We wanted youth involved. So we wanted to make sure that at least 30% of our board is under 30. So we're trying to do that as well. We've got some high schoolers that are engaged in what we're doing. So we're trying to make sure that we're being very holistic. We're actually global. We've launched a Brazil organization. So we've got ARC Brazil. It has about 20 members. We've launched an Instagram page. We actually have our first ARC Brazil event tonight at 6 p.m. I'm going to be launching a Brazil podcast. I launched an English version of the podcast. We got 10 episodes out there. By the way, 7-8 months ago, I didn't even know what a podcast was. Just to put it in perspective, I had no idea what it was. And now I'm producing, my own podcasts and publishing them. And now about to do one for Brazil. And we've got people who have never really been engaged before that are engaged. And the thing I'm most proud of is we've developed a process for transforming people. And again, some people would say to me like 8 months ago, why don't you just join the BLM movement? Why don't you just get behind what anything the NAACP is doing? I said, hey, those organizations we absolutely need, and we support them, and we're loud about it. But those organizations are focused on really getting legislation changed. BLM is all about getting policing legislation changed. NAACP is about getting civil rights legislation changed. There's other organizations that are trying to get voting rights changed. We need that. The only way to change, you got to get some laws changed as well. But our belief is you can change all the laws you want. If you don't change people's hearts, racism's not going away. And so our view is there's really not a lot of organizations working on that. There's nobody targeting white people in the suburbs, Latino people in the suburbs, Africans in the suburbs, African Americans, people like you who are fairly well off, you got good jobs. I'm not saying you all live in the suburbs. Some of you may live in Minneapolis and St. Paul. But the bottom line is a lot of us, and I was one of them just a couple of years ago, I just wasn't as connected. I just wasn't directly in it every day. You can lose kind of touch. And, look, I still live in Chaska, and I can tell you the people out here simply don't feel the impact of racism on a daily basis. So it's easy for them to forget and just not do anything. And with this organization, what we're trying to do is wake them up and get them to understand the only way this country is going to change is if a large enough majority of them decide they're going to put something on the line. We cannot tell white people they're not going to lose something to drive equality and to drive anti-racism. That's just not true. If you're always in the front of the line because your name is A and it's the alphabetical order, remember that when you were in elementary school, you were always first in line, and all of a sudden they change it and now Z's first and you're last, you lost something. But it's fairer, right? So we can't lie to people and say, you're not going to lose. We got to sacrifice. I was willing to sacrifice. I'm willing to sacrifice. I don't care if somebody comes after me, right? But that's where I am in life. What I'm trying to do is create an organization where everybody feels they can sacrifice something. They don't have to do what I'm doing, but at least target the people in your network. So we've created a program based on first helping people erase their ignorance about racism. You'd be shocked how many people really don't know what racism is, don't know where it came from, don't understand that race didn't even exist 500 years ago. Most people don't know any of this. So erase their ignorance about racism. Secondly, it's building their capability and understanding of what anti-racism is, and the concept that being a non-racist is actually being a racist. The non-racist is the guy who sits in the suburbs or downtown, wherever they are, but they say everybody's the same. We're all equal. I don't see color. Not that that's bad, it's just that it gives them an excuse to not fight against systemic and structural racism, to pretend it doesn't exist. And by doing that, it puts a pretty face on racism. It allows it to stay in place. So helping them understand the difference in what is anti-racism. And third is building the confidence, the character, and the courage to then do something about it, to talk to their friends, to talk to their parents. So we've created this program, and we're in the middle of trying to build it to scale so we can take it so everybody can leverage it, and we can start drastically increasing the momentum of this change. I'll give you some examples of that this is working. We have one guy, again, white guy, lower 40s, great guy, very, very supportive of anti-racism, but his parents and his family are not. And he's lacked the courage to take them on. His wife got involved with ARC from the very beginning, and she started working on him. You know, I work with her to erase her ignorance, to educate her on anti-racism, and to build her confidence and character, because the job then is to start transforming people in your network. So she started working on her husband. And he built the courage to eventually call his mother and tell his mother, I don't like the way that you guys are. You're going to have to change, or I'm not bringing my kids over there. Now, that took a lot of courage from him, but that's what it's going to take to eliminate racism. Another guy, former Fortune 500 executive, Republican, conservative. He'd been watching what we're doing from the side, seeing my LinkedIn posts, seeing what we're doing on Facebook, listening to podcasts. Eventually, he reached out, said, Donzel, can we have a conversation? I said, sure. Again, I'm open there. I'm open to Republicans as long as they're willing to understand racism comes before, tax policy. I agree if you don't want to pay taxes, great, but you can't be supporting racist politicians, right? Okay, so I'm gonna put that on the table first. But we sat down, we had a great conversation. He took notes, called me back a month later. Can we sit down again? Sit down again. And he wasn't declarative, didn't declare one way or another, but just kept asking me questions, wanting to learn. After about the third session, he told me, he said, Donzel, I'm starting to understand now. And he said, yesterday, I was golfing went golfing with my golf buddies. We were in the golf clubhouse. And he said, we're at a table, and they started talking about some topics as if we were all on the same team. He didn't say what the topic was, but you can guess what it was. And he said, I stood up and I slammed the table and I said, we're not all on the same team. Now that may sound like a small step to you. That's a big step. And he has continued to every couple months, he contacts me and he's taking more and more and more steps forward. And I continue to reinforce him. You have got to hold them accountable. It's great you made that move. Eventually you got to decide, do you really want to golf with these guys or not? Because as long as you continue to golf with them, you're saying it's okay. That's what the changes we're trying to make. Another Fortune 500 executive. I got to be careful with this one, but again, I'm going to call it like it is. So there was a very, very senior leader, made some comments. I didn't like it. I didn't think he was sensitive. So I called him on it publicly. So this lady is trying to be anti-racist. She's also a friend of this person. So she contacted me and she said, Donzel, I like what you said, but such and such, he's a good guy. He's trying. I think you misunderstood what he was saying. And actually, she sent me an email. So I got the email, and I'm about to respond to her. Respond to her with a long summary of why she's wrong. But I didn't. I said, you know what? She needs to learn. I'm just going to tell her, thank you for the feedback. So I responded, thank you for the feedback. She got the message. Because 10 minutes later, she called me. And she said, when you responded that way, it made me realize I might be missing something. She said, I've been reading White Fragility. I picked up the book and read, I can't remember what chapter it was, read it again. She said, I protected a racist. She said, you called him out as a white male in power. And instead of me saying I should talk to him as well, I tried to defend him. She said, that's what you're trying to explain to me that needs to end. I said, you absolutely got it. And I feel so much better. You understood and I didn't have to call you on it. That's what we're trying to change. I'll just give you one more example. This guy's in his 60s, long career as an engineer. You don't know a lot of white engineers, especially white males, very conservative, very, very conservative. And he said, again, after George Floyd's murder, he had to take another look at himself. And so he started doing his own research. I had never met this guy before, but he contacted me and said, I've been watching what you're posting. I've been listening to your podcast. So he contacted me and we had a conversation. And he said, after George Floyd's murder, I realized that I've been living in a bubble. And he said, I was of the perspective that, my parents were poor. I had to work my way through college. Nothing was ever given to me. And so I felt like, hey, why can't they do the same thing? He said, now I'm realizing that even no matter how low I started with white privilege that you never had. And he said, I enrolled in the University of Minnesota to take African-American studies course. This is a white guy in his 60s. He wrote a paper that he sent me on how to justify or how to explain how the American economy was built on the backs of slavery. But he used a formula converting slave labor to equivalency in terms of gallons of petrol fuel to try to monetize it from an engineer's perspective to show the egregiousness of the leveraging of slave labor and how that created this country and why African Americans deserve reparations. So I'm just telling you these stories just so you get a perspective that we are making a difference, and we feel very confident that if we can scale what we're doing, we can start creating a pretty significant change. And if we work, if groups like BLM and groups like the NAACP and all these other groups are working here on legislation, if we're working on people's hearts and getting people to change and hold their networks accountable, again, it doesn't make any difference if the people I talked about only hold this to themselves. What I'm pushing them on is, you got to talk to your friends. By the way, this white engineer, first I convinced him to work with our Facebook coordinator to provide her with content that middle-aged white guys would understand to get them to start transforming. But now he realizes he's got a post. He can't hide. So now he asked, can I be one of the people who coordinate Facebook so I can talk directly to these white males that need to change? So we believe if we can scale this, we can make this happen. So we've created a strategic plan. It kind of creates the organization and capabilities we need. We're trying to raise about $300,000 over the next 3 years to fund the human capacity, the human capital, and the systems capability to build and scale this program that erases ignorance about racism, educates people about anti-racism, and builds their character and confidence so that they can spread it. So we can build that and be able to work with other nonprofits so that we can do it with them for free, work with civic organizations, and then work with companies, big companies like a General Mills or a 3M or a Target to see if we can get them to roll this out throughout their company as well. Our board has already pledged $35,000 matching grant. We would love for TC BAND members to be willing to participate in that matching grant. You're the first ones to hear this. We're not rolling out our overall fundraising campaign until June. But this is such a critically important group because of the roles you have, the stature you have in this community, the ability you have to drive change. I thought I would introduce it to you first, give you a chance to get engaged. If you'd like to volunteer, we certainly would love to have you, but we'd also love your financial support as well. So after this, Eric, I can make sure that once we get we got some pledge sort of emails we're pulling together, I'll get that to your group. Any donation helps. $1, $50, $100. They get doubled immediately based on our matching grant. So you see our website listed here. Please check it out. Again, I've been publishing podcasts. There's 10 out there. I think you'll enjoy them. So please take a listen. So Eric, I'm going to stop there to make sure we've got some time for the fireside chat and some Q&A.
Great, thanks, Donzel. Great call to action, great clarity on the mission and the outcomes. Some of those stories are outstanding. The ability to have individual impacts and to change individual lives, change the world one life at a time. Great outcomes, great examples, great scenarios, and a great example of what we can all do to positively impact our community and to drive the social change that we're hoping to achieve. So it takes us, right?
Yes.
Thank you. So
thank you.
My fireside chat background for the fireside chat.
Nice.
So Donzel, I'll try to get in a couple of questions on leadership.
Yeah.
Then I'll open it up to questions from the audience. And Trinell, thanks for helping manage the Q&A for us. And then if there are not any additional questions from the audience, then I'll circle back with some of the other questions that we received as part of the survey. And so I'll exit this, and then we'll make the screen a little bit bigger here for you. And so from a leadership perspective, we got questions regarding, I'm a 35-year-old manager.
Yeah.
I want to be a corporate executive. Where do I start? What do I do? What path should I take? What things should I focus on? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, the first thing is make sure that's what you want. So I would say make sure that you understand, when you say, I want to be a corporate executive, that you have a good enough perspective on what that means. And is that what you want? Because there's things you got to sacrifice to be a Fortune 500 corporate executive. So that would be the first thing I tell you. And then if that is what you want, then it does come down to, all of us have to perform. You know that. It does come down to when it gets down to corporate, and this is what I try to explain to a lot of my white friends. Why is sports such a big thing in the Black community? The reason why sports is such a big thing in the Black community is because historically it's been the one area where it doesn't matter who your network of friends is, it doesn't matter who you know. If you're good, you're gonna play. It can't hold you back. Talent can't be held back. In corporate America, talent can be held back based on who you know, how you communicate, and those types of things. So you do have to learn how to play that game if this is what you really want. And then the key is going to be, how do you play that game while staying true to yourself? And that's really what I've been all about. So, my whole thing has been understand how to score points. What really is it going to take to drive differential results that cannot be argued? Number one. Number two, how to ensure that you're building strategies that go beyond just your team and you can execute those strategies. So, because they can hold you accountable for, okay, you get great results, but only in this small sphere. So you got to figure out what strategies can you put together that go beyond your scope and that are very clear to everyone else. Being able to make complicated things simple is another thing that I'll tell you is very important. If you can take the complex, you can simplify it for your team. You can take complex things that you're dealing with and simplify it up. That's love. So that type of communication is always very, very clear as well. And then you do have to make sure you can find some sponsors in the organization, because if you don't have a sponsor, there's no one at the table that's going to advocate for you. And that's kind of where you have to kind of know your organization. There's some organizations where there's a lot of sponsors. There's some where there are very few. I will say right now is probably as good a time as any to find sponsors. And when I say find sponsors, this is where you have to have the courage to just tell people what exactly you want. This is where a lot of people kind of fall off, and that's why I said, start off with, do you want it? And then if you really want it, you got to tell people. So let's find out, who the power brokers are in your organization. If it's not, you got to start with your manager. Don't go around them. Start with your manager. Find the next person in line at the senior level that can make those decisions. Again, I say right now is as good a time as any, because many organizations, especially in the Twin Cities, know they've got to do something in the wake of George Floyd's murder. They have to do something, because the facade has been removed about what Minnesota really is. Minnesota is Mississippi in the north. In fact, it might be worse. when you look at disparities, right? So if you look at the disparities only, disparity between majority and minority population when it comes to education, specifically brown and black people, when it comes to home ownership, wealth, when it comes to incarceration levels, police brutality, all of these things are some of the worst in the entire country. So executives in Minnesota know that the facade is now up. There's no more Minnesota nice. People know what Minnesota is about. So there's a lot of companies that are making commitments to double the amount of managers, increase their senior leadership representation, do everything they can to accelerate, in particular, African-American progression. So you just have to declare this is what you want. Make sure that your manager and whoever the person in your line is, is also aware, and then start identifying who can sponsor you if those folks in your line can't. And then lastly, you got to be willing to move. You don't have to stay with the companies that you're with. That's you have to make sure you be a free agent. There's no reward in just staying with the company just because you feel like, oh, well, I'm loyal. You have to be willing to follow the opportunities. And there's a lot of opportunities out there. So if that's what you really want, then go all in and go after it. Did that answer your question, Eric?
It is. Thank you. Just one quick piggyback to one of your comments. With yesterday being the 1-year anniversary of George Floyd's murder, lots of organizations came out with statements and commitments. How would you grade the impact of the execution versus the commitment from your lens?
Well, I'm a harsh grader. I would say probably D or F. I think that, and I'll be careful. I think there have been some really good things said and some good work done. I would just say it still comes down to are we seeing the representation that we should see? And overall, we just don't see that. Are we seeing specific things happen? We're not seeing that. How many companies have publicly come out and leaned in and say, hey, we're gonna, again, I'm just telling you how I feel about it. You got a policing bill right now at the state Senate here in Minnesota that they refuse to put on the floor that includes you can't have police officers who are part of hate groups, and the Senate won't hear it. How many CEOs in Minnesota have come out and said, we are against the Republican-led Senate, and we believe they should be voted out? None of them. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know of any that have. So I would say that's the level of change that we're going to have in this country. I believe the country's in serious trouble. And so, there's one side of what can companies do in terms of ensuring that there's better representation. There's the other side of what can companies do to change society. I don't think they're doing enough on either one of those fronts. I think right now they're doing just enough to try to look like they're moving forward. That would be my take. I'm looking for more dramatic action from these companies.
Great. Thanks for the thoughts there, Donzel. One note for the group. If you have questions, feel free to add those to the chat. We'll have an opportunity for a live chat, but if you want to submit a question via chat and have Janelle share that with us, please start thinking about that now as I ask another question or two on my side. One of the things that we've talked about within this group, particularly with Mayor Carter, was around authenticity.
Yeah.
I know you're Black, man. You're a former football player.
Yeah.
How are you able to show up at work? And the follow-up question: has that ability to show up and be authentic changed as you've ascended throughout your career?
I'd say that for the most part, throughout my career, I've pretty much been my authentic self. The only difference is that prior to 2016, I never would talk about politics at work. That would be the only difference, that I refrained from really talking about politics at all. But when 45 was elected, literally that next day I said, that's got to change. This can't stand. I'm going to the CEO and I'm going to ask him who he voted for. And that's exactly what I did. And if he voted for Donald Trump, I'm resigning. And so that's kind of, so I'm just telling you that was the one thing that changed. And literally from that point forward, I was loud and very, very frequent about that issue, that this was not about politics, it's about right or wrong, and I didn't care what happened. I guarantee you that had an impact on my career. There's no question about that. No question. But at that point, I felt like I had to make a decision. I had to make a decision. And for me, it was more important for me to be authentic and to speak up for those who could not. So there were others who are manager level in General Mills that I knew could not speak up, that were director level that I knew could not speak up, you know, that were junior level and I knew couldn't say anything. And so I had to make a choice. You know, do I just stay quiet so I don't have to sacrifice too much? Or do I say, you know what, man, I'm going to be myself and I'm going to speak out not only for my well-being, but to make sure that everybody else in this organization that wants to say something but can't because of their financial circumstance, their family, whatever the circumstance was, I'm going to stand up and speak out. That's the only thing that I'd say that's changed. Aside from that, I've pretty much been, you know, my authentic self throughout my time. Now, I left the Quaker Oats company because I felt like that company was not really structured where I was going to be successful. You know, they recruited me, which is great. But when I went to their corporate office, I didn't see anybody that looked like me. And all the executives were white male, cookie cutter kind of thing. And I didn't see that changing. And when General Mills recruited me, I did see some other people. The Black Champions Network had recently started. You know, I saw people like Kim Nelson. I saw those folks. And so this felt like a little bit more of an open environment. But I was clear with them up front as they recruited me in. I said, look, here's what I'm about. I told them exactly. I said, I'm only coming here to get to an executive level. If you give me the opportunity, I'm going to deliver. If you don't move me along, I will leave. I'm going to speak out. I'm going to tell you exactly how it is. So you either hire me or don't. But that's kind of how I laid it out. And so I came in, and that's kind of what I did. Now, I will also say that I am not a guy who doesn't understand that intersectionality plays to my advantage, right? So I'm Black, but I'm a male. I'm a cisgender male. I'm 6'5". I'm very confident. I'm a very good communicator, and all of that comes through, and that tends to give me some advantage. I've seen that play out. So that, I mean, we all have to be aware that there are things that we all have certain privileges. I have a lot of privileges. You know, I come from, you know, Key West, Florida. I grew up around a lot of different people. You know, a lot of us as African Americans were subject to redlining. Our grandparents didn't have a lot of wealth. They were redlined out of property ownership, or if they did own it, it was in areas that the property didn't appreciate. If you haven't read The Color of Law, please read it. To make sure you understand what I'm talking about. Key West is an island. So were Black people redlined? Yes. But there's only so much redlining you can do on an island, right? So property values are going to be what they are, you know, if you're on a 3x5 island. And if you're on an island and you're isolated, there's only so much that people can do to, you know, put you on the other side of tracks and treat you, you know, too bad because they need you. There's nobody else, right? So my great-grandparents, my grandparents, they owned their own homes, which provided stability. All of those things I understand benefited me, right? So all that plays into maybe the way I was able to bring myself authentically every day and say, if you don't like it, I'll leave. Not everybody has that kind of privilege, honestly. But just to answer your question, I just want to make sure you guys know I'm always trying to think and learn and understand that hey, there's reasons, you know, why I might be where I'm at. I got cousins that came from the same line. They're not where I'm at. Circumstance makes a difference. And that's the difference in terms of where we all come from and what white privilege is. But that's a different conversation.
Got it. Great perspective. One thing I would just reiterate was your candor and being clear about what you want and what your expectations are with your organization, which is something that I've found out that being vague or unclear or not having those conversations doesn't benefit you. If no one knows where you want to go, then they can't help you get there. And it also learned this from a performance appraisal perspective, because people give you feedback basis where they think you want to be or where they think you are versus giving you feedback where you aspire to be. Give me feedback for someone who's 2 levels up so I can build and develop skills to get there versus you're doing great at the current job, but that's not my goal. My goal is to be further ahead than that. So that's
Eric,
a great perspective.
I'm glad you brought that up. I want to make one quick point about that. I can tell you for sure, most people of color, African American, Latino, Asian, do not get great feedback. Typically, especially if their manager is white, their manager tends to not want to give them direct feedback, and they kind of dance around and keep it very vague. And so what ends up happening is the person doesn't really know where they stand, exactly like Eric said. And then when someone else gets promoted, they're kind of caught off guard. Well, why is that? So you have to make sure and hold whoever your manager is accountable to give you clear feedback. Ask the tough questions. I always tell people, ask them, where am I regarding your view on being a director? Would you rank me as the #1 director candidate? Where are you on me being an officer? Do I have your support? What are the things I have to work on specifically? You have to be that clear. If you're not going to get the responses that you're looking for, and your career will just continue to be kind of on a spinning wheel, like a hamster, just kind of running and never going anywhere.
Yeah, great perspective. And then once you get that feedback, then it's your decision at that point. Do I stay here and do this on this path, or do I decide to find an opportunity that might keep me on the track that I want to be on?
Absolutely.
So thank you. Thank you. Janelle, were there any questions?
Yeah, there's one good question here. And this is really about, being in this post-George Floyd environment right now, right? And the CEOs here in the Twin Cities or just across the country have signed declarations, these commitments. I know that we have things like the Minnesota Racial Equity Coalition. We now have the Alliance of Alliances. All these companies have said they're committed to action. The question is around how do we hold our organizations accountable based on those commitments? Are there strategies, approaches that we should be using as Black African-American employees of these organizations and holding them to those accountabilities? If so, how do we do that?
Yeah, I would say first is make sure they're getting clear, direct feedback. So I have literally sent feedback, to leaders, senior leaders, literally saying, you are not leading because you're not taking action. That kind of clear feedback. If you give them feedback that's generalized, it's the same thing for us. If you get generalized feedback, you can't do anything with it. If you give generalized feedback, the person can take the perspective of, oh, that's pretty good. I'm going to walk away. I don't have to do anything. You have to be very clear. If you have 800 numbers, use the 800 number. I mean, I don't know where all you guys stand in your career, and I don't know the companies you're with. So I don't want to give you, direction and then you go and it hurts your career. You got to make that decision. I'm just telling you what I do. What I decided I was going to do, I was willing to sacrifice. You may not be in that position financially, based on, your family. So use whatever vehicle you have to give direct feedback that's good for you. If the 800 number is good, use it. If you've got good HR people that you can trust, use it. If you've got, if their leaders really are open to listen, tell them. All right. So I think giving them direct feedback is kind of the first and foremost thing. I think at some point you got to be prepared to leave. I mean, that's the only other thing that some of these guys understand is when talented people leave and literally say in their exit interview, I'm leaving because this company does not stand up for its Black employees. I'm leaving because this company is not following through on its commitments. I want to work for a place that does. I mean, I can tell you that my son is telling me that the people in his age group, that's how they're making their decisions. He's saying a lot of the folks in his age group are targeting that they're avoiding all companies that they feel are not standing up, and they're targeting companies to work for that they feel are. Until you guys do the same thing, they're not going to hear you. It comes down to that. And so that's what I would tell you. Give feedback that's very clear and very direct, not generalized. Be clear. If you don't think the CEO is leading, say it. Now, again, don't go send an email direct to the CEO like I may have done. Don't do that. Do what you're comfortable with. But if you are going to give feedback, whether it's through anonymous or through surveys that come through, just be very, very clear and make sure that you're giving feedback on the circumstance that you want. And what we should be demanding is not just, we just want things to be better. No, what we should be demanding is we want things to be the way they're supposed to be. Right. And that's been the difference. I think we've all kind of been like, as long as things are better, and now what we've all got to stand up and say is, no, systemic and structural racism have got to go away. There's no place for racism in this society. There's no place for me performing at the same level and somebody else getting the nod. There's no place for consistently looking across income and saying that Black females are getting 65% of every dollar that a white male is getting. There's no place for that stuff. We don't want to get just a little bit better. We want what we deserve, which is equity. So tell them. Got it. That's what I would say.
Thank you. And so my comment about passion, hopefully there's no question that Donzel lived up to that billing that I provided. One thing for you, Donzel, thanks for joining. We appreciate your honest and candid feedback. And in the spirit of candid feedback, we got a comment in the chat for you. Awesome, candid career feedback, Donzel. So again, you've built another selection of fans outside the group that you already had. So thanks for your time. I appreciate your engagement. To all those attendees who stayed and joined with us, we thank you for your focusing on your growth and development and anti-racism and leadership. We have other programs coming. So thanks for your support. Have a good remainder of your day. And thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate you. Keep leading. We need you.